Good morning or good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining us. Before we jump into today's presentation, you will receive a copy of the presentation slides, and this webinar is being recorded and will be made available to you after today. Please note on your attendee panel that there is a box to ask any questions as they come to you, and we'll answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. My name is Carrie Gillum, and I'm the Director of Marketing here at Talemetry. We're excited to be here with you today and talk about how to help you get more candidates into Workday recruiting. More than 2,100 organizations have moved to Workday HCM, including 175 of the Fortune 500 and 20 of the Fortune 50. But many of these organizations, while they're realizing the benefits of the Workday platform, are finding themselves unable to get quality candidates into their new ATS. So we're excited to talk with you today with a couple of talent acquisition leaders about the strategies and tactics that are going to help to attract, engage, and bring more candidates into their Workday ATS. Our agenda today, we're going to cover the challenge of recruiting candidates in an unprecedented job market, effective inbound strategies, some outbound marketing strategies that work, a content strategy that will engage your candidates, strategies to target key audiences, and then changes to the conversion process that are going to really amplify and optimize your success. Our speakers today are Brad Jamieson and Stephen Schwander. Brad is the Director of Recruitment at the CME Group, the world's leading and most diverse derivatives marketplace. Brad is a seasoned talent acquisition executive with significant experience in the sourcing and recruitment of talent at all levels and domains. During his career, he's gained tremendous expertise in leading teams and implementing technologies and processes to create competitive advantage in talent recruitment. Stephen is the Director of Client Solutions at Talemetry. Stephen started his recruiting career in 1997 as a contingency technical recruiter for Wall Street Talent. He has 18 years of progressive experience in talent acquisition, including serving as the Director of Global Operations for Reuters. He has significant talent acquisition, operation, and enterprise implementation experience with several global clients across finance, manufacturing, telecom, and technology. Stephen enjoys helping the Talemetry clients to meet today's recruitment, sourcing, and marketing challenges. So welcome, Brad and Stephen.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yes, thanks.
So we're all faced with recruiting challenges today. Recruiting gets more and more difficult every day. Unemployment is the lowest it's been in 50 years. And the diversity of employees continues to grow. We've got 4 generations in their workforce, and their needs are all different. There was a recent report that we read that most millennials don't expect to work for a single company for more than 2 years, which means we're going to continue to see lots of transition and the need for continued proactive recruiting. There's 41 million job seekers in the United States at any given point in time, and this is a tremendous number and makes it tough for us to find the right candidates who are going to help us grow our companies. This places huge responsibility on the shoulders of recruiters. 77% of CEOs say that the availability of talent is their single greatest threat to their organization. Think about that. Having the right employees is what's one of the biggest priorities for all CEOs. It's huge, which is why so many of today's leaders are rethinking their technology and why it's so important that we as recruiters have the right strategies, tactics, and solutions in place to attract and engage that talent. So with that, I'd love to ask our panelists. Brad, would you mind maybe sharing a few of your thoughts about the recruiting challenges facing companies today, and maybe particularly in the finance industry?
Yeah, sure. So our problems are probably the same as everybody on the call today. I mean, the challenge is to find the top talent, the best talent, and to find it quickly. And what we're seeing out there right now is that for us, a lot of it is kind of technology candidates and quant-based candidates in the financial sector. But a lot of the best candidates are not out there in the traditional areas, the job boards, those sorts of things. It's really changed. They may have profiles, but they're hiding out there. You have to go find them. And so that's the challenge now, finding the best talent. And when you find them, you want to keep track of them. They may not be people that you need right away, or they're not ready right away, but the challenge is to know who they are and to keep track of them and to keep them engaged. And so we find that to be our biggest challenge, is just locating the people who are out there but aren't easy to find.
Mm-hmm. Stephen, is that consistent with what you see in the organizations that you work with?
Well, I think definitely. I think one of the challenges is understanding the audience that that our clients are working with, right? So Brad really references a specific audience segment, which is some would say purple squirrel. I just say a constrained skill set, right, and difficult to find, and that's not necessarily true of all areas of talent. But what is true is, this you referenced 41 million people looking for jobs, and yet everybody who's hiring people say they can't find them. Right. So I think one of the huge challenges is, how do you operationalize best practices in terms of, finding people, as Brad said, keeping track of them, doing the necessary data mining so that the right candidates come up to the top, and how do you be proactive with that? And sometimes I feel like best practices haven't changed a ton since I started doing this on the client server platform 21 years ago. But the availability of data has changed tremendously, and platforms have changed tremendously. But how good gets done, I think that's the challenge. How does good get done with the platforms that we have, and how do we operationalize that?
Mm-hmm. So just to kind of put some framework around this, we see recruitment marketing activities fall into 6 different channels or categories, from inbound marketing to sourcing, outbound marketing, and managing those relationships, candidate engagement, and then of course the conversions and outcomes. With a comprehensive strategy that really spans across all 6 of these channels, we find that talent acquisition teams are most successful in attracting, engaging, and then converting those candidates. So today we're going to focus on just a few of these channels in our conversation.
I think I'm gonna just jump in there, Carrie, if you don't mind. I think just this slide alone, we are talking about doing recruitment marketing together with Workday recruiting, right? And I think this slide alone just really tells us how complex the whole recruitment marketing arena is, and how there's simply not an ATS, even if it's a leading edge, cutting edge ATS. There's just not one out there that can meet the complexity across all these areas of capability. And I think that's really why it's important for us to be here today, to talk about how, what tools and processes do you put in place so that you can run this in an effective way with your ATS, and specifically today with Workday ATS. And I don't know, Brad, if that rings true for you as a client of both of those tools.
Yeah, it does. We went through an extensive RFP process over the last 2 years. We as a company made a decision to go to Workday, HR, finance, recruiting. But we in the recruiting area went through a extensive RFP for CRM sort of solutions. And we looked at the total HR systems and recruiting systems that, in Workday and other products, and found that there was this gap for the CRM side of things, which is why we're still with Talemetry, because the bigger ATSs don't seem to be doing this effectively, and they may talk about it, but it's really not there yet. That was our experience.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Sorry, Carrie, that just popped into my head as I, every time I see this slide, the complexity, really jumps out at me.
Right, absolutely. Great addition. So let's talk about some effective inbound marketing strategies and approaches. So to us, inbound includes things like job board advertising, digital advertising, in-person events, recruiters' personal networks, SEO, influencer or community-based marketing. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about inbound marketing strategies. So Brad, would you mind maybe sharing some of what has worked with you guys, some of the things that you do at CME to attract and engage talent?
Yeah, I'll tell you, we're not real far along. I think everybody on the call could probably relate to this. We're not where we want to be. We know what we want to do, and we're ready for that now because our platform's in place. And right now, as I speak, we are starting to implement our vision. So I can't say that we're there and we've been doing it and have numbers to show the results. But I will tell you that what we've done traditionally has been individual recruiters reaching out to candidates they have sourced or found somewhere and asking them if they might be interested in a job opening. This has been kind of the traditional approach in the industry, I think. And that's fine for what it is, but it doesn't help us get to where we need to be. And so what we're implementing now, because we do have the platform in place, is implementing more of a strategic take on the inbound marketing. This is contacting people who haven't contacted us, people that may or may not know about us. And so our strategy on that is pushing out more brand content. Here's what CME does. Here's what we do. Here's how it's impactful. Grow the brand. Don't talk about the jobs. The jobs are there, but talk about the company. And we work very carefully with our corporate communications and marketing teams to build content and then push it out to areas of pipeline talent, whether it's cybersecurity people that we want to reach out to with customized messages, or, Java developer professionals on the back end. But that's what we're implementing now. Like I said, we're not there yet, but we're starting that now. And that's going to be our approach. Keep it a little bit away from the specific job opening and more towards here's who we are, and build a following. And then in the telemetry world, build that talent network.
And in a world of Glassdoor, right, and we all do so much research on companies, I think that brand awareness and brand strategy being up front is so much more important now than it ever was before. Yeah,
definitely. Especially with us, because CME Group, we're well known in our little sector, but we're not a massive company. It's 2,700 employees globally. It's a leader in its sector, but there's a lot of people in this world who don't know who we are. It's a complex business, the financial derivatives markets. And so just educating people is vital.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when I think of inbound marketing, I really see it as a staple, right, of recruitment marketing. It's not something that's going to go away, but it's certainly something that's changed over the years. I mean, when I started, the staple for inbound marketing was still the newspaper, actually, right? And what I mean by that, it was, online had just started, but hiring managers, would never have considered their jobs actually advertised unless they could, open up the New York Times and see that advertisement, right?
Right.
That's changed, and I think the new staple really is probably Indeed and others like them, where we at least want to see the job out there so that we know there's some inbound marketing that's happening. But those are getting, Indeed is certainly getting tougher and tougher to work with, and the important thing about having a platform in place is really to be able to identify what kind of results you're getting from them, not only traffic, but also conversions. And we'll talk about conversions a little bit later. I like the move toward programmatic, where we see clients that are starting to use vendors that you can drive programmatic advertising, where they're getting paid per click or even paid per hire, as it were. I also like what Brad, you just mentioned, is some of the big brands are starting to mix their corporate brand with their employment brand strategy, and fairly successfully, right? I mean, I'll admit it, I was Netflix binge watching last night, and I'm watching Designated Survivor, and in the middle of one of my breaks comes on a wonderful advertisement for the CME Group. I wanted to apply, Brad.
Okay, right.
But there was no call to action, right? Because it's a branding message for the company, itself. So I think that's going to be the next challenge. There is, for people who do want to learn more, not either about the product on one hand, or about what it's like to work at a place like that. On the other hand, what's that call to action, right? And so now you start to see inbound marketing, being combined maybe with your CRM to capture a simple conversion, so that you can actually then proactively market out them, which we'll of course talk about a little bit later with outbound marketing. But see these things kind of come together. I think from a future perspective, I always think about this with regard to people who are advertising to me, and that's how do we emulate some of the B2C, meaning following people's interests, reminding them that we have jobs in that interest area, without actually causing dissatisfaction, right? And you think about all the advertisements we get on almost every device because we just ran a quick Google search. We don't want to be that annoying, but how can we be smarter and stickier in terms of our messaging to get people to respond? But just some thoughts. No productive ideas there, I'm sure. So,
no, it's all about planting the seed, right?
That's right.
So let's turn to outbound marketing strategies. So by outbound marketing or recruitment marketing, what we mean is opt-in talent networks, proactive multi-channel campaigns, strategic audience identification, personalized content, targeted CTAs, and even geolocalization. So Stephen, if you don't mind, maybe start with this, share some of the strategies for outbound marketing that you've seen successful in organizations.
Sure. No, absolutely. And I mean, let me just say this first. Given that we're talking about how do you do this, in a Workday world, and an ATS is always going to have the opportunity to send an outbound email, right? It's even going to have the opportunity to pull a bunch of people together in a larger email and send it out. But what we find is that the ability to do really complex segmentation of the audience, and we all get it, right? How many of us get emails from recruiting firms to apply for jobs that aren't relevant for us, right? I get invites 5 or 6 a week inviting me to be a recruiter someplace, right? And that was probably perfect for me 25 years ago, right? But it's not right now. And so, those organizations that are doing that don't have the ability to do that deep level segmentation so that the messaging that they're sending to me actually makes sense, right? So, so there's a couple of things that are important here. Number one is the capture of data, right? And then number two is understanding what you know about people in your database so that you can send the right amount of the right targeted message. And sometimes we don't know enough about people to send them an actual call to action to apply for a job. Maybe we just know enough about them that that tells us they're relevant to our general universe, right? And we'd like to learn more to see if there's a fit. So what that messaging looks like, is important. So I think when I think about our clients that are doing the best with this is, number one, they really value the data that they have, right? It's an asset to them. Number two, they're constantly improving upon the data that they have, which is twofold. Number one, they're constantly improving on the amount of data or the amount of profiles that they have, but they're also improving on the quality of the profiles that they have, meaning, do they know enough about those candidates? Have they built a relationship with those candidates so that they would be inclined to apply for a job if they sent them the right job, and can they track that relationship? So those are some of the things that are really important regarding outbound marketing, is the ability to know your data, manage it, segment it in the right place, and then be able to send messages that actually make sense for each of the people that are receiving it.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And that's what we've. I'm sorry, Carrie, but that's what we're doing here. So we implemented obviously Workday recruiting. We were formerly a Taleo environment here, and we had already implemented telemetry in the Taleo world. But we built the integration from telemetry into Workday, and obviously they're in sync with all the candidates in our database. But the key thing that we are working on now to do is to segment our database in telemetry, because we are building pipelines of talent in key areas, and those pipelines will be our those will be critical to us in terms of marketing our brand and pushing out, content to targeted people. So it's all about segmentation of our database right now, and on an ongoing fashion, keeping that segmentation, continuing to build our pipelines. That's critical for us. We don't want to be just focused on recruiting for an opening as it comes up. We want to be looking for talent constantly, such that when an opening does come up, we're ready for it faster, because we've nurtured those folders, those talent pipelines. But it comes down to segmenting our database, which we're working on now.
So we've talked a few times, it's come up about content, right? Content becoming more and more important to building relationships with candidates. Not only to educate them, but also to talk about and share our employer brands, making sure that they understand the value proposition, making sure that the candidates we do bring in are the right fit for our company cultures. And so it's important that we have a strategy that has the right kind of content to both educate as well as engage our candidates. Brad, I know you guys we had some great conversation in preparing for this about some of the things that you guys are planning with your content strategy. Could you share some of your thoughts there?
Yeah. I think the key thing for us is I mean, as a company, we compete for instance, technology area, we compete with all the social media companies. But the people that we are interviewing also typically have offers at places like Amazon, Google, that sort of thing. Even though they're not in the financial sector, they're still after the same sort of technical talent that we tend to go after. And so it's key for us to be able to differentiate ourselves, to understand what the value proposition is to a top candidate. Why come to CME when you've got such other great offers? And so our content has to show that. We work very closely with our marketing and communications team to develop content. The focus here is more on video content because it's very much a visual world out there. And the other thing is, the key thing is it's a very mobile world, a mobile device world. So we have to realize that our advertising, our jobs are all typically looked at on somebody while they're on their phone. And so our content has to recognize that. And for instance, what Talemetry allows us to do is to advertise our jobs, embed content, video content, for instance, on the same page, on the right rail of that job description, such that the candidate can click on that and execute the video without leaving the job. So they don't have to change pages. So we realize that the content's critical, but the delivery of the content is just as important. And so that's kind of been our approach with that.
Right. Yeah, it's all about getting the right piece of content to the right person at the right time.
And then we also recognize that there's different populations, and so I mean there's diversity and inclusion sorts of populations. People want to see what we're doing in that area. They want to see our community involvement, the impact our company makes on the world. So the content can't just be about the jobs. It has to be about, and the benefits and so forth. It has to be on the kind of company this is. And that's, again, becoming increasingly important in this day and age when the talent has the advantage, right? They're in big demand.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's just reflective, too, of going back to the different generations in our workforce and the changing workforce. People want to work for a company that really cares about the community, cares about the environment, right? It's more principles, I find now, than it used to be.
Yes, we're seeing a lot of that.
Yeah, I do think content is speaking to it's speaking to the heart, or we may say it's speaking to the creative aspects of the mind, right? Those things that are going to incline me as a candidate to act positively toward working for a CME group, and that's why, Brad, I thought the advertising I saw yesterday was so great, because it showed the kinds of things that can happen in our world because CME does what they do, right? And I thought, well, gosh, if I knew how to write a line of code, I'd be right there. So I think that's definitely it. But I think in terms of content strategy, a couple of things that I think are important, and Carrie, you said this earlier. You said to educate and engage, and I think we've really seen a change in what are we educating about, right? And why is it becoming engaging? I mean, you have one of my old clients up on before I came to Talemetry up on the screen here, and I remember some of the first career sites that we built as a team, where we were still so much oriented toward what do we need people to know, right? And our career sites were built on here's the process for how we do hiring, and here's what all our benefits are, and here's all this stuff, all this HR stuff. And over the years we morphed and grew to say, no, these aren't things that people need to know to make a decision positively to work for us. So what we educate people on has changed to be much more engaging in and of itself. I think it's important when we think about content that it's not just pushing content out for the sake of content, but so that we can then turn that into actionable data, right? Or create calls to action based on that. So not only can I push out content so that I can get a video, but can I when I push a video out, can somebody quickly convert either to a person of interest in my talent community or an actual applicant right from the content that I put out there. So when we put content out there, how can we turn people into how can we convert them at that level? And then number two, how can we know what content is actually relevant and engaging for people? Are we tracking how much each page is being hit, and time people are spending on that, and numbers of conversions we're getting off of that? And in the whole conversion strategy, which we'll talk about in a moment as well, but with regard to content, maybe it's not always applying for for a job. Brad, you said it earlier, right? We want to get content out there that's going to be engaging, that's probably going to be informative, that is almost a service to the folks that capture it. But then what if we turn that around and say, well, I'm not pushing jobs on folks, but maybe I've got a really good white paper, just like we do in business to business marketing, where if I set up an email wall that says, give me your email and I'll give you this white paper on financial engineering, right? So that we start to see some give and take and conversation grow from a content and engagement strategy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think another point, I think, Brad, it was you that mentioned the other day when we were talking about the fact that content doesn't all need to come from corporate communications or from talent acquisition, but to really convert candidates, they want to hear from the people that they're going to be working with, right? So having a strategy that pulls in your engineers, pulls in your developers, pulls in whomever into creating some of that content, I think that's hugely successful in really converting those candidates.
Yeah, I had a conversation with one of our senior software engineers here recently and asked him, they get bombarded constantly by job requests and people after them for to consider openings and so forth, and they constantly deflect those. And I said, what sort of thing would you ever click on to look at? And he said, any sort of interesting, relevant content to work I do, and preferably written by somebody from the company that is reaching out to me. They want to know that smart people work at this place. They're attracted to companies where smart people work, and you engage them by giving them relevant content to their job, ideally written by people from your company, because it shows, wow, those are smart people. I want to work at a place where there's smart people. So that was a really interesting idea, which I think we're going to pursue.
It's a great idea. So let's talk a little bit about audiences. Knowing who your audience is really going to be critical to any kind of recruiting success. One of the components of Telemetry's Evolve model defines the three unique audiences: the key talent audiences, strategic audiences, and relationship audiences. So by key talent audiences, we mean high volume jobs, targeted or critical jobs based on job families or geographies. Strategic audiences will typically include groups of diversity candidates, university or recent college graduates, veterans and military hiring, or maybe executives. And then relationship audiences are those candidates that we've already had some kind of relationship with, such as employee referrals, internal employees, contingent workers, past applicants, such as silver medalists or high potential candidates. And I know, Brad, you've already touched on this a little bit, the fact that when we're recruiting, we need to be recruiting for the long term, not just the current open rec. So I guess, can you share a little bit about some of the things that you guys do to segment your audiences and then different strategies to reach out to them?
Yeah, and again, I just have to let people know that we're not mature with this yet. We've spent a lot of time the last year or two building our platform so that we can do these sorts of things. So we're embarking on them now. So I can't tell you that this particular approach has worked and we can demonstrate that. But I will tell you that we definitely have focused traditionally more on the immediate audience of candidates for open recs, and that's important, but that's just one part of this. So different audiences are certainly diversity audiences. We, like most companies, need to improve a lot in that area, but now we have a better way of identifying those sectors. We have employee network groups in the company that are identified, that are set up around different diversity groups and so forth, and so we use their networks to reach out as well. But we provide them they provide them the content and work through their networks. So that's more of a strategic sort of audience. We do a lot of a decent amount of very, very senior executive recruitment for our corporate leaders, C-level and just below that. We do that in-house. But there's a lot of research and market mapping that goes on with that. And then again, there's a different sort of messaging that goes out to those sorts of people. So we're getting much better at kind of segmenting our audiences and then tailoring our reach out to them. As I said, the platform is now there for us to do that, and we're just kind of embarking on that. So I wouldn't say we're real mature on that yet, but that's our thoughts.
It's a work in progress, as it always is, right?
Yep.
And I think that's pretty true of most of our clients as well, right? So they have a concept of who they're reaching out to and who that audience should be, but how to kind of identify that from a technology standpoint, and then identify it from a strategic standpoint. So not only those people you can already identify having been in that audience, but as data comes in, how do you automatically identify that that the new people coming into your database, actually should be assigned to, one audience or another audience, right? Some of our larger clients, and particularly in the healthcare space, where we've got clients that are, also on Workday, but are in the tens of thousands in terms from an employee, standpoint. These are real challenges for them, right? Where they do need to segment an audience of executives or C-level folks across a large organization from, let's say, food service personnel, because how you're going to engage with those two audiences is going to be very different. Sometimes there's HR reasons why you want to keep that data separate, but we'll just keep on the interesting stuff, which is the marketing stuff. How you're going to engage those two audiences is going to be different, or maybe you want to create an overall audience of nurse, so that you can have a kind of slow drip campaign, so, to all the nurses in your database, versus having a very targeted segment of ER nurses, so that when there's a need, how to reach out to that specific audience in a really quick way, right? So, the concept of audiences is important so that you can actually drive relevant content, but then it's important also so you can be far more predictive in terms of getting your jobs filled in a faster way and in a more predictive way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in the folders and the tags, those tools within telemetry allow us to do that better. So we're spending a lot of time making sure that we're developing a kind of consistent, robust folder and tag kind of process to help us do that.
Yeah, it makes sense, and you're going to love what's coming out in a couple of weeks. That's going to help us to automate some of that stuff based upon incoming data, and really segment that audience so that it's it happens, thanks to big data and understanding. So very cool.
Yeah.
So one other area we wanted to talk about was on the candidate conversion process. So it's shocking, but most organizations are only converting about 20 to 30% of their candidates. So really what that means is after you've made the investment, you've attracted a candidate, you've engaged that candidate, and then you've invited them to either apply for a job or join a talent network or some other conversion point, 70% of the candidates are not going to complete that final step. And so when we consider the fact that the recruiting industry is spending $200 billion a year annually to recruit candidates, there's a tremendous amount of waste occurring in the industry. So what goes wrong with candidate conversions? The candidates get distracted, right? We all have shorter attention spans than we used to. We make the process unnecessarily complex. We're adding steps. We're asking for data that we don't really need at that point in time. And we're putting too much workload on the candidates, right? We're not making changes in the process to make it easier for them to either complete that job application or join the talent network or whatever it is that we're asking them to do. So one of the things that we've measured is what's the impact on conversion rates. And what we found is the companies who actually measure their conversion rates are 2 times more likely to have a better candidate experience and 3 times more likely to improve the quality of hires. So think about that. What would that mean to your organization if you could improve your candidate experience and quality of hire just by focusing on that conversion process? So for the second year in a row, our research, the Talemetry research team has completed an audit of the candidate conversion process for each of the Fortune 500 companies, focused on really its 8 specific areas: registration required, the social profile apply, cloud storage apply, campus or event registration, passive capture opportunities such as opt-in talent networks, opt-in job alerts, and then we also this year spent some time researching the impact of Google for Jobs and Indeed Apply. And so Stephen, if you don't mind maybe sharing a little bit about the results of that research and an example of an optimized process.
Yep, sorry about my microphone just went dead on me. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I think in terms of best practice, and part of my challenge with conversion is how do we define conversion as a client? Is it always that final conversion? And I think you referenced it earlier, taking a look at the results of the survey in terms of what options for conversion are out there, right? And I think another interesting study would be to see how much of those options actually lead to a better conversion rate once you actually ask people to apply for a job, because over the course of time you've actually built a better relationship with them. But we've got a client now who's up to an 83.1% conversion rate because they've made some very specific changes to their application process, right? And you can see on the screen here, the type of data that we're able to provide a client on the application process in terms of what steps the applicants are going through, when they actually drop off, what's the completion rate for each application process. And so a couple of things that clients will do is, number one, across all boards, if they want to increase well, let's just say number one, putting in telemetry increases conversion automatically because of the stop sign that you saw in the prior slide, because we're taking away the requirement to actually create a login and password, yet another login and password in our lives. So by taking that requirement away, we're taking away a stop sign that probably kills 75% of would-be applicants, right? So that alone is huge. But then the second thing that our clients who are successful will do across it is simplify the process and really take a look at, as you said earlier, what data do we need now versus what data can we capture later? Brad, you mentioned that when we talked earlier this week about your experience and the ability that Workday has for us for you to be able to go out and capture more information when that information is required, right? So that you're not capturing everything up front. We like to say you're not capturing the credit card on the way into the store, right? You're taking data when you need it, right? So those two things are huge, and then making sure that the application or the conversion process is fully optimized, meaning they can capture their resume, they can upload and parse their resume from any sources, or use a social apply source. It doesn't matter where their resume is sitting; they're able to do that very quickly. So I think from an application perspective, those are the three areas that you want to improve your application process. But from a general conversion process, I would then also add that you want to take a look at what I like to call the mini conversions, or when you're in sales, you always say the little yeses before the big yes, and make sure that you've got a really simple way for people to sign up for job alerts, and then make sure that you're able to track who's there, and that becomes a part of your CRM tool, right? So that you know that there's data there, joining a talent network, giving you additional information, and then finally making that final application process far smoother. And I know, Brad, you've had some really good success with this yourself as well.
Yeah, so what we did is, when we were implementing Workday recruiting, unfortunately with Workday, the application process, you essentially have one shot at it. So you have to fill out the entire application. You can't go back and update that. Now that may change in the future, but right now that was a big roadblock, because we have a fairly extensive application process. And again, candidates are on their phones filling out these applications. We needed to be quick and scaled back. Otherwise, we would lose them. And so we were able to have the first part, the most critical information of the application, done via telemetry, and then pass that into Workday. And if a candidate got to a higher point, then we could send what we call a supplemental application out to them via a Workday questionnaire. So we've been able to kind of bridge both worlds and get what we need. And so our initial application process is very scaled down, very fast. And they parse in their profiles, and the parsing seems to work pretty well. But that's handled through telemetry. We couldn't do that given Workday's constraints right now.
Yeah, I think strategically also, it's important from a conversion perspective to say, what, one size does not fit all. In particularly in larger organizations, and if you think about, maybe when you go back to the audience conversation, and Carrie mentioned earlier, the difference between, let's say, a higher volume audience and a more targeted skill set audience, right? You may want to have a different kind of experience for both of those, right? So maybe in some of our clients who have, high volume recruiting, where they actually need to do a little bit more screening up front for those, they may want to have a longer conversion process, and that might be important to them, because the challenge is to get a higher volume of people narrowed down because of quality. When you start looking at targeted skill set audiences, you now have a different challenge. Your talent acquisition challenge is a little bit different. It's actually getting people into the system so that you can start then to engage with them. That might need to be a really simple application process, and by overlaying telemetry on top of a Workday, we're able to do that dynamically up front, and push people through different kinds of conversion processes based upon what your strategy is for those specific audiences.
Right, and that seems to work well for us. It took some building, but now it's fully operational.
And if anybody is interested in learning more about the Fortune 500 conversion audit, we actually, I think just last night, published the report, so it is available on telemetry.com under resources, and you can go out there and download it, or of course just let us know, and we're happy to send you a copy of the report. So that was really the gist of what we had to cover today. If anybody does have any additional questions, please feel free to enter them into the question box. We did have a couple of questions here to cover, and I'll put this out there. What's more important to start with, inbound marketing or outbound marketing? Stephen, maybe if you don't mind sharing your thoughts on that, and then Brad can give his opinions.
To me, that's a challenging question for me because I think I would have to understand, what data is available to a client. So, if I was starting from a blank slate, I'd probably say inbound marketing because we need to start building up those contacts, right? But sometimes, we might go live with a client who's got, say, 10 million past applicants. In which case I would say, shoot, there's 10 million people you can start to market to immediately. You know something about them, and I might push outbound marketing up, for that particular client. So, man, I hate to sit on the fence there, but that's how I would probably make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think outbound is going to be easier because you know that you have the contacts, you know these people, and you can, you might be able to quickly push specific content to them. I think for us, inbound, it requires a lot more coordination with our marketing team to have the right message being sent out there, the right brand. So it becomes a more coordinated, more strategic effort. It takes a little bit more time on our end to get it all laid out properly.
Great. Another question, Stephen, maybe you can answer this. Does Talemetry integrate with Workday recruiting?
Yes, and we've, our integration team has such deep integration background, and we have successfully integrated with Workday, and they continue to deliver implementations on that integration.
Great.
Yeah, we just went through it in June, so it's live and productive for us now.
There's the proof. Great. Well, I think that wraps up our questions and our discussion today. Thank you, Brad and Stephen, for great insights and direction and advice for our audience. I thought you guys had some really good perspectives and experience to share with the audience.
All right, sure.
Excellent, thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody, for participating, and I hope everybody has a great rest of your day.